They thought age softened a woman. They thought I wouldn't notice. But when I opened the little drawer where my blood pressure pills always lay and found nothing but an empty blister and a folded note that read, "You'll get them back when you learn some respect," something ancient inside me, older than my bones, older than fear, finally woke up. I stood there for a long moment, holding that ridiculous note between my fingers. My name is Margaret Holloway. I am 78. And I've survived loss, widowhood, 2 surgeries, the depression's echo, and the slow betrayal of my own joints. But I had never, in all those years, been told to earn the right to breathe. The house was quiet. Tom's footsteps had already faded as he left for work, and Erica's voice, sharp as a snapped twig, was drifting faintly from the kitchen. She was on the phone again. She spoke in that tone she used only when she spoke about me, a tone that carried both irritation and triumph, as if she were discussing a stubborn stain that refused to lift. "No, she'll be fine. She has to learn boundaries. She can't just take her medication whenever she wants. The doctor said she should follow our schedule." Yes, exactly. This is for her own good. For my own good. People always say that when they've done something cruel and want to feel clean afterward. I stepped back from the drawer, slow and steady, the way I'd learned after my fall last spring. That fall was the reason I was here, in their house, in this temporary arrangement. Tom had insisted. "Just until you get stronger, Mom." But healing had come and gone, and still I remained. Once I'd believed it was concern. Now I wasn't so sure. My fingers brushed the edge of the countertop, steadying myself as warmth pulsed at my temples, the first warning that my blood pressure was climbing. I knew my numbers. I'd learned my body the same way one learns the shifting seasons. Without those pills, the evening could end in flashing lights and a hospital bed. And yet, they had taken them. I walked toward the living room, the old carpet muffling my steps. Sunlight was spilling through the curtains, thin, tired light that softened every edge. On the mantel were pictures of my husband, Daniel, smiling that gentle smile that always told me things would be all right. I looked at him now and felt the truth settle heavy in my chest. No one in this house thought of me as a person anymore. Not Tom, not Erica. Certainly not the woman on the phone declaring herself my keeper. I eased into the armchair. The quiet pressed in, thick and suffocating. My heartbeat had begun to thrum too hard, a warning drum I could not ignore. I closed my eyes, breathed slowly, counted to 4. But calm wouldn't come, not this time. Because this wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't a misplaced bottle or a harmless mistake. This was deliberate. A lesson, they said, to teach me respect. My eyes drifted toward the far corner of the ceiling, toward the tiny round lens Tom had installed 2 years ago for safety, back when he still pretended to care what I thought. He'd turned the cameras off last year, claiming the subscription was too expensive. What he didn't know, and what I had never told him, was that the system wasn't as dead as he believed. I still had the login. I still had the power to turn them on. I looked again at the note in my hand. A ridiculous scrap of paper. Yet it carried the weight of every small humiliation that had piled up these past months. Every snide comment. Every controlled rule. Every door closed a little too loudly after I entered a room. My pulse beat harder. My breath deepened. And something inside me settled. Not in despair, but in clarity. If they wanted to teach me a lesson, I would let them. But not the one they expected. Slowly, deliberately, I reached for my phone. And with one quiet tap, the cameras in the house flickered back to life. The thing about falling at my age is that everyone suddenly decides you're no longer capable of deciding anything at all. When I broke my hip last spring, one careless step on wet pavement, my world shrank overnight. Doctors, nurses, social workers, all repeating the same phrase. "You shouldn't live alone for a while, Margaret." Tom had stood at the foot of my hospital bed, arms crossed, pretending concern was a heavy coat he didn't quite know how to wear. "Mom, it's safer if you stay with us," he'd said. "Just until you're steady on your feet again." And I'd believed him, or rather, I'd wanted to. I had always imagined my later years differently. My own little house with the porch Daniel built, my rose bushes, my slow mornings with the radio humming. Independence was never about pride. It was about dignity. The simple dignity of choosing when to wake, when to rest, when to sit with your own thoughts. But after the fall, everything felt fragile. I was tired, in pain, and too worn out to argue. So I let Tom drive me to their house, his house now, though not in the way he believed. A detail he'd overlooked, though the day would come when he'd understand it well. At first it wasn't terrible. A small guest room, a window that faced the street. Erica bringing me soup, though she'd place it on the bedside table as if it might bite her. I told myself it was only temporary, that in a few months I'd be back home trimming my roses. But weeks turned into months, and small adjustments became silent confinements. It began with my mail. "We'll keep it in the kitchen so you don't have to walk so much," Tom had said, except I never saw half of it again. Then my keys disappeared. "You're not supposed to drive yet, Mom." I hadn't asked to. I only wanted to hold them, my last symbol of belonging to my own life. My walker was moved from the hallway to their closet to keep things tidy. I had to ask for it, like a child asking permission to go outside. And then came the schedules. Mealtimes decided for me. Showers supervised. My medication placed in a little plastic organizer Erica carried like a badge of authority. "We'll manage it," she had said. "It's safer this way." Safer for whom? Certainly not for the woman whose body told her far more accurately than any schedule when pressure was rising or when dizziness was setting in. Tom started speaking to me with that soft, patronizing tone people reserve for the very young or the very old. "Mom, you didn't need to go through the mail." "Mom, why are you out of your room?" "Mom, we worry when you make decisions on your own." On my own. Imagine that. At 78, a lifetime of decisions behind me, and suddenly I wasn't to make any. I remember one afternoon, this was just after I'd regained enough strength to walk without the walker indoors, when Erica stood blocking the doorway as I tried to go to the porch. "It's too cold outside," she'd said. "It's 74 degrees, I answered. "Well, it feels cold." "Not to me." She folded her arms. "Margaret, we can't have you catching pneumonia. Tom worries." What Tom worried about, though I didn't understand it fully yet, was control slipping from his hands. And Erica, oh, she thrived on it. Every boundary tightened, every privilege removed, fed something hungry in her. Little humiliations piled up like dust on the windowsill. Comments about the way I folded towels, about how long I sat in the bathroom, about my forgetfulness, even when I hadn't forgotten a thing. But the real shift, the moment I understood things had turned, happened the evening Tom brought home a stack of paperwork. "Mom," he'd said, setting them on the table, "we need to update some household permissions. Nothing major, just practical things. Power of attorney, medical decisions, financial oversight." I felt Daniel's absence like a bruise. He would have known exactly what to say. He'd always had the spine for both of us. I simply smiled then, nodded, and slid the papers aside. It was too soon. I was still healing, still trusting, and trust blinds more sharply than age. When the pain in my hip eased and walking became natural again, I suggested, very gently, that I might return home. Tom didn't even look up from his phone. "Mom, it's not safe yet." Erica didn't bother with gentleness. "Besides, it's easier to look after you here." Look after. Such a pretty phrase for such an ugly truth. Because somewhere along the way, without my noticing, help had become ownership, and ownership had become resentment, and resentment had begun to curdle into something worse. All of that was before they hid my medication, before the note, before the cameras blinked awake again. If I'd understood sooner what kind of trap I'd walked into, perhaps I would have acted earlier. But that kind of clarity only comes when the last small mercy is taken away, and all that remains is the quiet resolve of a woman who has run out of patience. And on that morning, as the cameras came to life, resolve was the only strength I had left. People like to say a mother always knows her child. I used to believe that too. But as I sat there that morning, listening to Erica's voice drift through the walls and watching the little camera icon glow faintly on my phone, I realized something painful. My son had grown into a man I no longer recognized. Tom wasn't cruel by nature. No, his cruelty was quieter, softer, wrapped in a blanket of excuses he told himself so often he began to believe them. When he was a boy, he'd cry when he accidentally stepped on an ant. At 12, he carried our sick cat to the vet in the pouring rain because he couldn't bear to see her struggle. Even later in college, he'd call me at night just to say he was homesick. But life changes people, or maybe it reveals them. I think the shift started after Daniel died. Tom was 40 then, an age when a man either stands on his own or leans on others. He leaned. Hard. Grief had made him gentle for a while, almost tender, coming by the house every evening, asking if I'd eaten, fixing shelves he'd ignored for years. I mistook that for closeness. In truth, he was circling something else entirely. Responsibility. And he didn't want it. Then came Erica. She walked into his life like someone entering a room she already owned. Beautiful, yes, in that polished, glossy way women get when they know the world bends for them. But there was something else, a sharpness around the mouth, a stillness in the eyes, a woman who measured everything, people especially. When Tom introduced her to me for the first time, she shook my hand lightly, her smile too bright, too rehearsed. "So nice to finally meet you, Margaret," she'd said. "Tom talks about you all the time." But he hadn't. And the way she glanced around my living room, Daniel's chair, my worn rug, the photos on the mantel, told me she'd already formed an opinion. She never said anything unkind outright. That wasn't her style. Her specialty was suggestion. "Maybe it's time to renovate, Margaret. Do you feel safe living alone at your age? Tom worries about you, you know. So do I." I didn't believe her then. I should have. Tom changed around her. He softened. Yes, but not toward me. He softened toward her disapproval. It shaped him, bent him. He began repeating her words as if they were his own. "Mom, the house needs too much work. Mom, you shouldn't drive anymore. Mom, Erica says—" Always, Erica says, as if she were the hinge his life swung on. When I fell and broke my hip, Erica was the one who arrived at the hospital first. Tom trailed behind her like a student waiting for instructions. "Oh, Margaret," she'd said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "You can't go back to that old house alone. It's dangerous, and far too much for you to manage." Tom nodded beside her, eager for her approval. "Mom, she's right. Just stay with us. Please, we'll make it comfortable." Comfortable. I should have listened to what his eyes were saying instead of his words. They weren't pleading. They were relieved. Relieved that the decision wasn't his to defend anymore. Once I moved in, the dynamic settled quickly. Erica had a new project, me. A grandmother-sized burden she could dress up as care while tightening control inch by inch. Tom followed her lead without noticing. Or maybe without wanting to notice. He'd grown used to comfort, hers, mine, anyone's. Used to being served, agreed with, smoothed over. I don't think he even realized how easily he surrendered his backbone. What hurt the most wasn't his weakness. Weakness is human. What hurt was the way he let her rewrite the story of who I was. Mom gets confused. Mom needs structure. Mom shouldn't make decisions while recovering. He said these things kindly, softly, as if they were facts. And when I pushed back, even gently, his face twisted into something I'd never seen in my son before. Irritation? A flicker of shame? Maybe even embarrassment, as if I were an inconvenience he desperately wished would stay quiet. I felt it most of all the night he told me in that careful voice, "Mom, don't worry about your house paperwork. Erica and I will help manage things for you. Just trust us." Trust us. People don't say that unless they doubt they deserve it. So when I turned on those cameras and saw Tom in the kitchen that morning, leaning against the counter while Erica explained why hiding my medication was necessary discipline, I didn't feel shock. I felt recognition. A son I once knew was gone. A man who wanted an easier mother had taken his place. And I knew then that whatever happened next, whatever strength I needed to find, I would face it alone, the way I'd faced everything else that mattered. If Tom was a soft erosion, slow, almost invisible, then Erica was a hammer. She didn't pretend to love me. She didn't even pretend to like me. What she did instead was far more insidious. She acted as though my presence in their home was an administrative inconvenience, a problem to be solved with scheduling, rules, and consequences. The first time I truly saw her without the mask was a morning in June. I'd woken earlier than usual and made my way to the kitchen for tea. She didn't hear me enter. She stood at the stove cracking eggs into a pan, speaking on the phone in a bright tone that dimmed the moment she said my name. "I'm doing everything I can," she whispered. "But she's stubborn. She insists on doing things her way, at her age. Yes, Tom supports me, but you know how he is. Too soft. Someone has to set boundaries." Set boundaries. The phrase floated in the air like a sour smell. When she finally noticed me, she startled just slightly, then smiled the way people do when they've been overheard saying something ugly. "Oh, Margaret, you're up already. I was just talking about how well you're recovering." I didn't respond. I simply filled the kettle and let the silence stiffen between us. After that day, she stopped pretending altogether. It wasn't hostility. Not exactly. Hostility would have been honest. Instead, she offered me a polished, managerial kind of cruelty. Every kindness she gave had a cost. Every word she spoke had a hook. "Let me handle your prescriptions," she said one evening, gathering the pill bottles into a plastic bin. "It's too complicated for you now." "Give me your wallet," she insisted another time. "We'll keep it safe so nothing gets lost. Don't worry about cooking. We don't want you making a mess in the kitchen." Each sentence trimmed away another piece of my independence, and she did it with such unshakable confidence, as if she were doing me a favor. But her eyes always betrayed the truth. She enjoyed it. The smaller I became, the larger she felt. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scold. Instead, she'd tilt her head and speak gently, almost sweetly, the way one talks to a child too slow to understand simple directions. Margaret, don't touch the thermostat. Margaret, you've already had your afternoon tea. Margaret, we've agreed you won't leave the house without telling us. Agreed. I never agreed to anything, but I let it pass, day after day, because pushing back against a woman like Erica was like trying to push back the tide with bare hands. The more resistance you showed, the more determined she became. I saw her true satisfaction on the days I needed help with my hip. A simple request would make her eyes brighten faintly, as though she'd been waiting for me to need her. She'd sigh heavily, as if burdened, but her steps grew lighter. Dependence thrilled her. One afternoon, I made the mistake of opening the kitchen window to let fresh air in. Just air, not freedom, not danger. Air. Erica appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by the breeze. Margaret, did you open that? Her voice was calm, but her eyes narrowed. Yes, I answered. It was stuffy. You could have caused a draft, she said. Tom gets migraines from drafts. Tom, who slept with the ceiling fan on high. She closed the window with a decisive click, as though sealing a confession. Please consult us before changing anything in the house. It disrupts the harmony. Harmony. She used that word often, usually right before or after taking something away from me. Tom, of course, never challenged her. If I mentioned any of it to him, he'd chuckle softly, kiss the top of my head like I was a child, and say, Erica's just trying to make things easier for you. She means well. I stopped mentioning anything at all, because nothing empowers a woman like Erica more than silence, and nothing weakens a woman like me faster than hoping silence will keep the peace. Then came the house expectations, a polite term for rules. They printed them on paper. 3 neat, bullet-pointed pages. I still remember the first line. To ensure a respectful and safe household environment. Respectful. A word Erica wielded like a weapon. And when she told me, in a tone so soft it chilled me. Margaret, you must take your medication only when we give it to you. I felt something tighten around my ribs. Because that was not concern. That was ownership. The day they hid my pills, the day they left that note, wasn't a sudden cruelty. It was simply the first cruelty they executed without pretending it was anything else. And as I sat watching Erica pace the hallway through the reactivated camera feed, I finally understood. She didn't want me safe, or healthy, or cared for. She wanted me small. But I had been Daniel Holloway's wife for 53 years. I had not lived a small life, and I would not die a small woman. Not in their house. Not under her rules. People assume that cruelty arrives like a storm. Loud, sudden, unmistakable. But the kind that settles into a household is quieter. It seeps in like dampness, softens the wood, weakens the beams, until one day the whole structure sags, and you wonder when exactly it stopped being a home. By the time my medication vanished, the house had already shifted around me in 100 small ways. It started with doors. One afternoon, I reached for the doorknob to the backyard, the little space where they kept tomato pots, and where I liked to sit when the sun wasn't too harsh. The handle didn't turn. It's just for now, Erica had said later. We don't want you tripping on the steps again. There were 3 steps. I'd used them for months without a problem. A week later, the basement door was locked. "Too much clutter down there," Tom said. Then the garage was locked. "Chemicals and tools," he explained. Even the side gate got a new latch. Little by little, their house became a series of closed spaces, and I was allowed only in the ones designated safe. Safe, I learned, meant easily supervised. Then came my belongings. First it was my shawl, a wool one Daniel bought me on a trip to Maine. It disappeared from the armchair. Later, I found it stuffed behind a storage box in the hall closet. "Oh," Erica said, "I put it away so it wouldn't get dusty." But the closet reeked of mothballs, and the shawl was creased as if it had been shoved rather than placed. Another day, my reading glasses vanished. No one admitted moving them. I found them 2 days later on the top shelf of the laundry cabinet, a place I couldn't reach even on my strongest days. I began to keep my few meaningful things: Daniel's watch, my small silver locket, my old letters, in a pouch under my mattress, like a child hiding treasure. Not because they wanted them, but because losing them would have broken something inside me far more fragile than bone. Then there were the comments. Soft, mild, delivered with that same managerial calm. "Margaret, you've been in the bathroom for quite a while. Are you feeling confused?" "Margaret, the mail is overwhelming for you. We'll sort it." "Margaret, don't touch the laundry machine. It's more complex than the one you had." Everything was suddenly too much for me. Laundry, mail, stairs, clutter, choices. It chipped away at me in ways I didn't notice at first. After enough repetition, even a strong woman begins to hesitate before reaching for her own cup of tea. Even a confident woman starts to question whether she's forgotten something. Their favorite word became misremembered. "Mom, you misremembered. We already told you we changed the thermostat." "You misremembered. We said we'd handle your appointments." "You misremembered. We never promised the spare room would be yours." The last one stung. Tom had promised it, of course, on the very first night. A small space I could make my own, somewhere quiet. But Erica took it for her office, and suddenly that promise vanished into thin air, or into her version of events which she insisted were fact. It was subtle, the way they rewrote reality around me. I tried once, gently, to point out that I did remember things, that I wasn't slipping the way they implied. Tom had exhaled the way people do when they're preparing to correct you. "Mom, you get overwhelmed. It's normal. Don't worry about trying to keep up." "Don't worry." Another phrase that translated to, "Stop resisting." The worst moment, until the pills disappeared, came one afternoon when I reached for my purse to get my notebook. The purse wasn't where I'd left it. I found it later in the laundry room, next to a bin of old rags. "Tom moved it," Erica said. "You left it in the wrong place." No, I hadn't. But I didn't argue, because by then I'd learned the rhythm of their corrections, the tightening net, the soft suggestions that I was unreliable, forgetful, dependent. That was the true cruelty. Not the lost shawl, not the locked doors, not even the missing purse. It was the effort to make me doubt my own mind, to make me small enough to manage. I didn't begin noticing the pattern all at once. It took time. A sharp word here, an unnecessary rule there. But when I look back now, I realize every step, every restriction, was preparing the ground for the morning my pills disappeared. For the note. For the lesson. Because people don't jump straight into taking a woman's medication. They build toward it, carefully, brick by brick, until the moment they believe she is too disoriented to fight back. But they miscalculated. They forgot who I had been before the fall, before the quiet months in their house, before their rules swallowed the walls around me. They forgot I had lived a full life before either of them learned to walk. And they certainly forgot that stillness isn't weakness. Stillness is preparation. That night, the house felt different. Not louder, not darker. Just wrong. The way a room feels after someone moves a chair an inch to the left. Small things out of place. Small things that disturb the air. I tried to lie down, but the pillow felt too high, the sheets too tight, and my heartbeat thumped against my ribs with that slow, heavy insistence I knew too well. A rising pressure. A warning. I'd lived with hypertension for 20 years. I knew the signs. I reached for the drawer again, though I already knew it was empty. I don't know why I did that. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope. But the empty space greeted me like a slap. My hand trembled. Not from fear, from calculation. At 78, you learn the difference between panic and danger. Panic scatters you. Danger sharpens. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slow and deep, waiting for the dizziness to settle. It didn't. A warmth crept up the back of my neck, the familiar flush before a blood pressure spike. I needed the pills, not later, not according to their schedule. Now. Erica's words from earlier floated back to me, thin and cold. She'll learn respect. Respect? For whom? For what? For their convenience? For their control? For a household where I'd become an obligation to be managed rather than a woman to be cared for? The dizziness pulsed again. I pressed my hand to the mattress to steady myself. If I fainted, they'd call it confusion. If I collapsed, they'd call it fragile health. They would twist it into more rules, more control, more reasons to supervise me. I couldn't give them that. After a moment, I reached for my phone. Not to call Tom or Erica. They were the last people I wanted near me. I went straight to the app I hadn't opened in almost a year. Tom had told me the subscription was canceled. He'd said the cameras were too much trouble, that no one needed surveillance in a safe home. But when I entered the password, the screen lit up with a soft blue glow and the cameras blinked awake one by one. Living room, hallway, kitchen, stairwell. Silent, watchful, unbiased. And there she was, Erica, walking through the kitchen, opening drawers, rearranging things with that brisk authority she claimed was for my benefit. Tom sat at the table, scrolling on his phone, his posture slumped, his face drawn in that helpless expression he wore whenever her instructions became too sharp. "She'll ask for the pills tonight," Erica said. Tom didn't look up. "Maybe we should just give them back." "And undo the lesson?" Her voice tightened. "She needs structure. She gets confused. This is for her own good." Tom hesitated. Then he nodded. I watched him agree to something that could have put me in the hospital. Watched him trade my safety for domestic harmony. A part of me cracked then, quietly, like ice breaking under a thin layer of snow. I felt the dizziness again, stronger this time. My body was urging me toward fear, but my mind refused it. Instead, I memorized the timestamp on the recording. I saved a clip, then another. My hands steadied. This wasn't just spite. This was documentation. I set the phone down on the nightstand. The glow of the screen cast a faint light across the room, catching the frame of Daniel's photo. He was smiling the way he always did. Gently, like he was encouraging me from across a distance I no longer feared. "I know," I whispered to the empty room. "I hear you." I pushed myself up, slow but deliberate, and made my way to the bathroom. I splashed water on my face, waited until the dizziness eased, and returned to bed. No pills, no apology, no help. But I had the truth recorded, their voices, their decisions, their intent. And the truth, unlike them, had never failed me. That was the night something inside me shifted for good, not into anger, into clarity. They wanted to teach me a lesson. Fine. But I had just begun preparing mine. Morning came slowly, as if the sun hesitated to touch that house. I woke with the same heaviness in my temples, the familiar throb behind the eyes. The pills were still gone. The note still sat where I'd left it, a small, smug thing. But I didn't reach for it again. I reached for my phone. The interface of the camera app was simple. Tom had chosen it because he wasn't good with anything complicated. Little squares showing empty rooms, morning light, shadows shifting. I tapped the recording from last night again, not because I doubted what I'd seen, but because I wanted to feel the truth settle fully, without trembling. There was Erica's voice, cool, certain. There was Tom's quiet surrender. There was the drawer where she placed my pills, closed with a casual hand. At the end of the clip, Erica laughed softly, a sound I'd never heard her make toward me. "Respect," she said. "It's time she learned it." I sat still in my bed, watching my son's bowed head in the recording. A part of me kept wanting to make excuses for him, the way mothers do even when logic has collapsed. He's tired. He's stressed. He doesn't realize the danger. But the camera didn't allow illusions. The camera showed a man who understood exactly what he was doing and chose to do it anyway. And so I saved the clip. Then another. Each one documenting not just an incident, but a pattern. I watched recordings from the previous week. I saw Erica moving my reading glasses to a high shelf. I saw Tom dropping my mail into a drawer and locking it. I saw them whispering in the hallway about small consequences, about discipline, about how she needs structure or she gets confused. Confused. That word again. They were building a case in real time, brick by brick, and they didn't even know they were being recorded. At one point, I paused the video, staring at Tom's face. He wasn't cruel, not like her. But he was something in many ways worse, weak. And weakness, when paired with someone like Erica, becomes a tool. My heartbeat steadied as I continued watching. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I didn't feel shock anymore. That emotion had burned out during the long night. This was clarity, and I welcomed it. Around 9, I heard footsteps in the hall. Erica's. Her rhythm was unmistakable, purposeful, clipped. A woman who believed every room she entered belonged to her. I watched her through the camera feed as she walked past my door, hesitated, then leaned closer, listening, checking. Always checking. I kept my breathing quiet. After a moment, she moved on. I switched to the kitchen camera. She opened the drawer where my pills now sat, tucked behind a stack of napkins, and looked at them as though admiring her own handiwork. Then she closed the drawer and straightened her posture with the satisfaction of someone who believed she had solved a problem. But I wasn't the problem. Her confidence was. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that there were 2 unmarked folders already living on my phone. One labeled daily, the other critical. A system I'd set up long before moving into their house, back when Daniel passed and the world felt too heavy to trust. A habit born not from fear, but from wisdom. Older women learn to document. Not because they expect trouble, but because life teaches us trouble arrives, whether we expect it or not. I added last night's videos to Critical, then I backed them up to the cloud. By the time Tom left for work, I was dressed, sitting in the armchair, watching the front hallway camera. I saw him look toward my room, almost guilty, almost sorry. But not enough to knock. Not enough to offer the pills. Not enough to undo the harm. Weakness doesn't undo itself. Erica passed through behind him and locked the door after he left, as if sealing the house from the outside world. She didn't see my phone in my lap. She didn't see the small, steady set of my jaw. She believed I was powerless. But power isn't noise. It isn't youth. It isn't strength of body. It's knowledge. And I knew now, without doubt, without hesitation, that what they were doing wasn't care, wasn't clumsiness, wasn't oversight. It was abuse. Quiet, domestic, polite abuse. The kind people justify over dinner tables. I closed the camera app and folded my hands in my lap. A simple gesture, but inside it, a decision had taken root. Not panic, not revenge, action. The next morning, I felt the weight in my chest return. Not fear, not sadness, but the pressing awareness that every hour without the medication was borrowed time. The dizziness came and went in slow waves. My mouth felt dry, my pulse too quick. I needed a doctor, not theirs, mine. Dr. Patel had been my physician for almost 15 years. A patient man, gentle with his explanations, firm when necessary. He never let age be an excuse, only a factor. Tom disliked him because he refused to treat me like a fragile senior. I reached for my phone. My hands still shook slightly, but the decision did not. "Mrs. Holloway?" he answered on the second ring. "Is everything all right?" For a moment, the truth stayed lodged in my throat. Not from shame, from the bitterness of finally speaking aloud what had been building inside the silence of that house. But I forced myself to breathe. "No, doctor," I said. "I'm not all right." He heard something in my voice. I could tell by the shift in his tone. "What's happened?" "They've withheld my medication," I said, intentionally. Silence. Not the confused sort, the horrified sort. "Who is they, Mrs. Holloway?" "My son and his wife." Another pause, shorter but heavier. "Are you safe at this moment?" "I'm upright," I said. "For now." "Do you have access to your pills?" "No." "Do you know where they are?" "Yes," I answered, "and I have video proof." That changed the conversation. Something in him sharpened. "Listen to me," he said, his voice measured. "Hypertension is not something to play with. This is medical neglect. I want you to come to my office today." "I'll need transportation," I said. "I doubt they'll offer it." "I'll arrange a medical transport if I have to," he replied. "But please, don't wait. If you feel faint, call 911. Warmth unknotted something in my chest. Not relief, clarity. This was the first time in months someone spoke to me like I was still a person capable of decisions, not a piece of furniture to be supervised. "I'll come," I said, "but I won't be telling them." "Good," he replied. "We'll talk here. And Mrs. Holloway, you did the right thing by calling." After we hung up, I sat still for a moment, feeling the dizziness pulse again at the edges. Not dangerous yet. Not at the tipping point, but close enough. I watched the hallway camera. Erica was in the kitchen rearranging the shelves. My shelves, technically, though she didn't know that yet. Her movements were brisk, confident. She had no idea I was leaving. No idea the ground was beginning to shift. At 10 o'clock, I slipped my coat on. Slowly, carefully. The house was quiet. Erica had gone upstairs. I made my way to the door, holding the railing, keeping my breathing steady. Outside, the sunlight felt like a blessing I hadn't earned, but desperately needed. I walked to the end of the street, one slow step at a time, and waited for the car Dr. Patel had arranged. The driver was a young man with kind eyes who offered his arm without making me feel helpless. I didn't take it, not because of pride, but because for the first time in a long while, I needed to walk on my own. At the clinic, Dr. Patel greeted me himself. He looked at me the way Daniel used to look when something troubled him deeply. "Sit," he said gently. "Let's check your numbers." The blood pressure cuff tightened around my arm. He frowned at the reading. "You were right to come. This could have escalated very badly." I nodded. "I knew." He sat across from me, folding his hands. "Mrs. Holloway, do you want help documenting this formally?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Do you feel safe returning home today?" Safe? Such a complicated word. "I feel aware," I said, "and I'm not done." He considered that, then nodded slowly. "We'll proceed carefully. You're not alone in this." Not alone. A strange thought. A good one. As I left his office, I felt the dizziness easing. Not because my condition had suddenly improved, but because for the first time in months, I had acted, not endured. And action, I learned that day, is its own kind of medicine. I didn't go straight home after the clinic. I asked the driver to stop 2 blocks from the house and let me walk the rest of the way. I needed the time, not for my body, for my mind. The decision I was about to make wasn't small. Once taken, it couldn't be undone. I sat on a bench near the little community garden and took out my phone. I opened the folder labeled Critical. All the videos were there, each one a quiet witness. I knew what I needed next. A lawyer, not a family one, not someone who would urge reconciliation, someone who understood elder rights, documentation, pressure, and control. I had a name written years ago on a card Daniel gave me before he died. "Just in case," he'd said. That man always believed in preparing for storms long before clouds appeared. I dialed the number with steady fingers. "Office of Henry Alvarez," a calm female voice answered. "I need to speak with Mr. Alvarez," I said. "It's urgent, and it concerns elder neglect." There was no hesitation. "Can you come today?" I exhaled, relieved. "Yes, in an hour." When I arrived, a receptionist showed me into a modest office filled with books and framed certificates. Mr. Alvarez stood as I entered, a man in his late 50s with a thoughtful expression and the kind of eyes that listen before the mouth ever speaks. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, offering his hand. "Please, sit. Tell me what happened." And I did. Not dramatically, not tearfully, just plainly, the way truth likes to be told. He didn't interrupt, not once. But his jaw tightened at the right moments. When I described the note, the hidden medication, the rules, the confiscated mail. When I finished, he leaned forward. "Do you have evidence?" "Yes," I said. "I do." I opened the folder on my phone and pressed play. He watched the first video without blinking, then the second, then the clip of Erica laughing as she said the word respect. When it ended, he sat back slowly. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, "what they are doing is not just morally wrong, it is legally dangerous. You are not confused. You are not imagining this. And you are not powerless." Those were the 3 sentences I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. He continued, his voice calm but firm. You have grounds to file a complaint. You also have grounds to remove them from decision-making over your health, finances, and property, if that is what you want." "It is," I said. There was no tremor in my voice. "Good. Then we move carefully, quietly, and we prepare everything before they even suspect it's happening." I nodded. That was exactly what I needed. "What would you like to do first?" he asked. "I want to protect my assets," I said, "and I want documentation that makes their behavior impossible to deny." "That," he replied, "is my specialty." We spent the next hour going through details: dates, specific incidents, names of medical providers, my home's legal status, the recording's timestamps. At the end, he looked at me with something like respect. Not pity, not concern, but respect. "You are very composed, Mrs. Holloway." "I've had a long life," I said, "and I've learned when silence is survival, and when action is necessary." He nodded once. "We will file nothing today," he said. "First, we gather, we structure, we build a case that cannot be twisted or diluted. And when that case is ready, then," he said, "we act, and they will not see it coming." As I left his office, something inside me felt lighter. Not joyful, no. That feeling was still far away, but grounded, strong. For months, the house had been closing around me, inch by inch. But now, for the first time since I'd stepped through Tom's door, I felt the walls expand again. Not physically, but inside me. I wasn't a trapped woman. I wasn't a helpless patient. I wasn't an elderly burden in their care. I was Margaret Holloway, and I finally had a path forward. When I stepped out of Mr. Alvarez's office, I didn't go straight home. Not yet. My legs were tired, yes, but my mind was sharper than it had been in months. I knew exactly what the next step had to be. If Erica and Tom wanted control, they wanted it for one reason above all: money. And money, especially the kind Daniel left me, has a way of attracting hands that were never meant to touch it. Before his death, Daniel had arranged our affairs with meticulous care. "I want you protected," he'd said. He never trusted convenience or good intentions or the vague warmth of promises. He trusted documents, paperwork, signatures, structure. For years, I thought he was simply trying to ease his own mind. Now I understood. He'd been trying to protect mine. I went to the bank, the same little branch on North Elm Street, where the manager still remembered Daniel's fondness for lemon candies. When I walked in, she recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, coming around the counter. "Are you all right? You look different today." "Clear," I answered. "I look clear." She led me to her office, and I explained what I needed. Not emotionally, not as a plea, but as a checklist. A review of account access. Confirmation of beneficiaries. Verification of the living trust Daniel set up. Reinstatement of independent control over all transfers and statements. She typed quickly, her expression shifting from curiosity to something sharper. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, looking at the screen, "your son requested viewing access to your accounts last month." I felt the words settle on me like cold dust. "And was it granted?" "No," she said firmly, "because the trust lists you as the sole trustee until death or voluntary transfer. Only you may authorize access." Daniel. Even now, he was still standing between me and danger. "Good," I said softly. "Let's keep it that way." We went through every document: the trust, the property deed, the retirement funds. Everything in Daniel's careful handwriting, preserved, witnessed, notarized. Not a single clause allowed Tom or Erica to touch anything without my consent. Would you like to update your successor trustee? She asked. Yes, I said. I would. Who will it be? Your son? No. I didn't hesitate. My grandson, Matthew. Tom's boy. The only one who still called me without needing anything. A young man with a good heart. The kind Daniel would have trusted. She nodded and made the changes, sliding the papers toward me. I'll need your signature here, and here, and here. I signed each line slowly, feeling not fear or spite, but stability, like bricks being laid under my feet. When the documents were done, she leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Holloway, this was a wise decision, and just to be clear, your son has no legal authority over your health or finances, and he cannot gain it without your explicit permission. I nodded. I'm aware, and now so are you. Before leaving, I asked her one last thing. Could you send paper statements to my private P.O. box again? Not the house. Of course. Paper trails, evidence, independence. Outside, the air felt cooler. The dizziness had eased since the doctor restarted the medication at his clinic. My steps were slow but steady. I wasn't done. Not by far. But this step, this quiet reclaiming of what was mine, changed something in me. When I finally reached the house, Erica's car was in the driveway. I stood there for a moment, looking at the windows, at the curtains she'd chosen, at the front door she locked so confidently. Nothing on the outside had changed, but everything inside me had. This wasn't their ground anymore. It was a battlefield I had already begun to map. And I was no longer the woman who arrived after a fall, grateful for shelter. I was the woman Daniel prepared me to be. The woman who kept records. The woman who protected her dignity. The woman who knew the law when others relied on manipulation. They believed they held the advantage. But the truth, the legal, documented, time-stamped truth, had already shifted in my favor. And they hadn't even noticed. Not yet. By the time I returned home that afternoon, the house no longer felt like a place I lived in. It felt like a place I was passing through, a temporary shelter with walls that believed they held me. But I knew better now. And knowledge, once found, doesn't slip back into ignorance. I stepped inside quietly. Erica was in the kitchen, wiping the same spotless counter she had already wiped twice that morning. She looked up the moment I entered. You were gone, she said. Not a question. An accusation. I stepped out, I replied, hanging my coat on the rack. You should have told me. There was something almost comical in the way she said it, as though I were a misplaced item she'd been trying to inventory. I didn't realize I needed permission, I said calmly. Her lips tightened. She wasn't used to calmness. She knew how to battle tears, confusion, apologies, not quiet certainty. That baffled her. And beneath the bafflement, I saw something else, flickering for just a moment. Unease. Tom was worried, she added. I didn't bother responding. Tom wasn't home yet, and worry from him had become a performance he delivered on cue. I went to my room and closed the door, a luxury she normally disapproved of, judging by how often she hovered near the hallway. I placed my phone on the nightstand and checked the cameras again. Erica had begun pacing. Good. Let her pace. The truth makes guilty people restless. Half an hour later, Tom returned. I heard his voice in the kitchen. Soft, uncertain, as if bracing for something. Where was she? He asked. I don't know, Erica said sharply. She didn't tell me. So she just left? I watched through the hallway camera as he rubbed the back of his neck. It was the gesture of a man who knows something is slipping, but can't name what. Erica lowered her voice, but not enough. "This is exactly what I mean," she snapped. "She wanders off, she gets confused, and then we're the ones blamed if something happens." "Did something happen?" "No," she said, "but it could." And there it was. The seed she'd planted in him months ago, now fully grown. If she acts independently, something is wrong with her. If she disagrees, she's confused. If she resists, she's unstable. I watched the scene unfold like a silent play. Erica pacing, Tom shrinking, both circling a story they had decided to believe because it made them feel in control. But control is fragile when built on assumption. I stepped into the kitchen quietly. Neither of them heard me at first. "I went to see my doctor," I said. Erica froze. Tom turned too quickly, eyes widening. "You what?" Erica asked. "I saw my doctor," I repeated. "He's adjusting my medication plan, and he documented the missing pills." Tom's mouth fell open slightly. Erica blinked, once, twice, the way people do when reality veers off their script. "We didn't withhold anything," she said too quickly. "You must have—" "Don't," I said softly. "Not today." Something in my voice made her stop. She stood straighter, trying to reassess me. Tom stepped forward. "Mom, we were just trying to help." "No," I said. "You were trying to manage me." The words landed heavier than I expected. Tom flinched as if I'd struck him. "Mom, you're taking this the wrong way." "I'm taking it exactly the way it happened." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It wasn't peaceful. It was tight and breathless, like a sheet pulled too hard across a bed frame. Erica's voice came next, low, controlled. "What did the doctor say?" "That I'm competent," I replied. "That withholding medication is dangerous, and that I should take further steps." I watched her face pale, just slightly. She processed more quickly than Tom. She always did. She saw what this meant. Documentation, a doctor's statement, a threat to the tidy narrative she'd polished so carefully. Tom swallowed. "Mom? What steps?" "You'll see," I said. Not because I intended cruelty, but because I intended truth. And truth, in this house, had become a foreign language. I turned and walked back to my room. Behind me, I heard Erica mutter something sharp, and Tom murmur something softer. The same old rhythm, her domination, his retreat. But today the rhythm had changed. A single beat had broken out of their pattern. Me. For the first time, they sensed I was no longer inside their grasp. They just didn't know how far outside I already was. The next days unfolded quietly, which made the shift even more noticeable. Erica watched me like a cat watches a closed door, impatient, alert, waiting for something she couldn't quite name. Tom hovered with forced gentleness, asking if I needed anything, but the question always sounded rehearsed, as if he were practicing lines someone else had written. They sensed something was happening. They just didn't know what. And I didn't rush to enlighten them. On Wednesday morning, I woke early, dressed slowly, and made tea without asking permission. A tiny gesture, but I felt Erica's eyes on my back the entire time. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You've been going out a lot lately," she said. "I have appointments." "With whom?" I looked at her calmly. "People who know their field." It unsettled her. Not because I withheld information, but because I didn't bother lying to make her comfortable. She preferred the old version of me, the one who apologized for existing. Later, Tom drove to work, but not before lingering beside my chair, shifting from foot to foot. "Mom, if something's wrong—" "It is," I said. but not in the way you think." His eyes dimmed, as if he already feared the answer he didn't dare ask. When the door finally shut behind him, I took out the envelope Mr. Alvarez had prepared. Inside were the documents that changed everything. A formal declaration revoking any assumed authority Tom or Erica believed they had over my health or decisions. Confirmation of my grandson Matthew as my successor trustee. And most importantly, filings that revalidated my sole control over the house Daniel and I owned. The same house I had not lived in for months, the house still technically in my name alone. Tom never noticed that detail. Erica never asked. They assumed ownership is a feeling, not paperwork. By 10 o'clock, I was at my old house, my real house, with Mr. Alvarez and a locksmith. Dust floated in the beams of sun cutting across the empty foyer. The walls looked tired, but they were mine. My footsteps echoed in the stillness, and for the first time in a year, I felt present, not monitored, not managed, alive. We changed every lock. We updated every file. We posted a notarized notice on the inside of the door to establish occupancy and legal standing. "Mrs. Holloway," Mr. Alvarez said as he handed me the new keys, "you are the only person with legal access to this property now." The metal felt warm in my palm. A simple shape, a reclaimed life. Afterward, we drove to his office where he finalized the next stage, a series of notices addressed to Tom and Erica. Official, precise, unambiguous. When he read the contents aloud, I felt neither triumph nor malice, only a deep, steady relief. "By law," he said, "they cannot make decisions for you. They cannot manage your medication, your finances, or your movements, and they cannot claim any authority in your home. If they continue their behavior, we have sufficient evidence to pursue further action." I nodded. "Send them." "Are you sure you want to return to their house tonight?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said. "One last time. Because some endings must be witnessed." In the afternoon, I walked back into their home as quietly as I had walked out. Erica was in the living room, flipping through a magazine. She looked up sharply. "You were gone again." "Yes," I said. "You'll receive paperwork this evening." Her magazine slipped from her hands. "Paperwork? What paperwork?" "You'll see." She pushed herself halfway off the couch. "Margaret, what did you do?" "For the first time in a long while," I said, "something for myself." Tom arrived just before dinner. It took 5 minutes before his phone buzzed. Then Erica's. They both checked their screens at the same time. I watched their faces shift, confusion, then shock, then a dawning fear that settled deep. Tom looked at me, pale. "Mom, what is this?" "Clarity," I said. "No, seriously." "It explains," I said calmly, "what you are no longer allowed to do and what I am no longer willing to tolerate." Erica's voice cracked. "You went to a lawyer?" "I did." "Why didn't you talk to us first?" "I tried," I said, "for months." Silence spread between us, heavy, unbreakable. They had wanted control. They had counted on my silence. They had never imagined I might choose myself instead. And as I looked at their faces, stunned, cornered, small, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not revenge, freedom. I spent that evening in my room, not hiding, simply waiting. Waiting for the storm that never came. Tom and Erica didn't argue, didn't shout. They whispered in tight, frantic bursts behind their closed door, their voices too low to understand but too sharp to mistake. Fear changes tone. I recognized it instantly. They kept glancing at me through the hallway, as if expecting a confrontation, but I had no reason to confront them anymore. Everything that needed to be said was already printed on official letterhead and delivered to their inboxes. By 9 o'clock, the house had gone quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the suspended kind, where people hold their breath because they don't know what tomorrow looks like. I lay in bed, staring at the faint outline of the window, and felt a strange stillness inside me. For months, I'd lived in a space that wasn't mine, under rules I hadn't agreed to, absorbing cruelties disguised as concern. But now, the weight was gone. As if the house itself felt lighter simply because I no longer needed anything from it. The next morning, I woke early, not from pain, not from worry, but from a clear thought. It's time to go. I rose slowly, dressed without rushing, and opened my closet. There wasn't much to take. Most of my life was still in my real home, untouched, waiting. Here, I had only what I needed to survive. A few dresses, my robe, my slippers, my pouch of precious things. I packed quietly. No trembling, no second-guessing. Just deliberate movement, the way a woman folds away a chapter she's finished reading. My coat went on last. The same soft navy one Daniel once said made me look unyielding. I smiled at the memory. A small, private warmth. When I stepped into the hallway, the house felt even smaller than before, as if the walls had been shrinking all along, and I'd only now noticed. Erica appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her hair unbrushed, her eyes ringed with sleeplessness. "You're leaving?" she asked. "Yes." "Where will you go?" "Home." She swallowed, looking at the suitcase. "You don't have to do this." "I already have." Tom came out of the kitchen then, his shoulders slumped, his face gray with worry. A boy again, for a moment. My boy. But even then, the truth didn't soften. "Mom, we can fix this." "You had chances," I said. "More than you realize." He stepped closer. "I didn't know it would go this far." "It went exactly as far as you allowed." The silence that followed carried every missed moment, every failure to stand up, every time he had chosen comfort over decency. But I didn't list those things. I didn't need to. They sat clearly between us, understood without words. I reached for the front door. The handle felt warm beneath my hand. "Please," Tom whispered. "At least stay for breakfast. Let's talk." I turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. "Talking is what could have saved us," I said. But control was easier. And then I opened the door. The morning air felt crisp, clean, like something new. I stepped outside, pulling the suitcase behind me, feeling each inch of distance grow between me and the house that never wanted me whole. I didn't look back. Not out of pride, out of completion. Some endings don't need reverence. They only need truth. The cab dropped me off at my real house just after noon. The new keys felt unfamiliar in my hand. Not heavy, not light. Simply right. I let myself in slowly, as if I were entering a church. The air was still. Dust floated quietly in the sunlight. And for a moment, the silence wrapped around me like a blessing I had forgotten how to receive. Nothing had been touched. No one had rearranged the shelves. No one had locked doors for my own good. I walked from room to room, breathing in the familiarity. The creak of the floor near the hallway closet. The faint scent of old pine from the dresser. Daniel refinished himself. I touched the back of his chair, letting my hand rest there a moment longer than necessary. This place remembered me. This place had waited. By 2 o'clock, the locksmith had finished the last lock. He handed me the final key and said, "All secure now, ma'am." His voice was warm, respectful, the way a man speaks to someone who stands on her own 2 feet, even if those feet aren't perfectly steady. After he left, I made myself tea. Real tea, in my own kitchen, without anyone watching the clock or counting my cups. The kettle hissed softly, and I found myself smiling at its old, familiar rattle. It was the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. At 4, I sat at the dining table and opened my notebook, the same one Erica called messy. I wrote down everything I needed to do next. Call Matthew, update Dr. Patel, schedule a home evaluation for safety rails, check the heater, buy groceries, breathe. Simple things. Ordinary things. Mine. Then, as the shadows began to grow long across the floor, I prepared the envelope for Tom and Erica. Not the legal one that had already been delivered. This one was personal. Short. Clear. Without anger. I wrote, "You are formally notified that I have moved out. Do not come to this address without invitation. All future communication will go through my attorney. I wish you clarity in the days ahead. Mother." I didn't add anything else. Explanations were no longer necessary. At 6, I called a courier. A young woman picked up the envelope and nodded politely. "Deliver tonight?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Tonight." When the door closed behind her, I stood still for a long time in the quiet. For the first time since the fall, I felt my shoulders loosen. There was no dread waiting in the hallway, no footsteps pacing above me, no rules disguised as kindness, just the soft hum of the house settling, as if exhaling with me. As the sky darkened, I lit the small lamp by the sofa, the one Daniel used when he read the paper. The light was warm, gentle, forgiving. I sank into the cushion and let my eyes close, not from exhaustion, but from peace. A strange thing happened then. I realized I wasn't lonely, not even a little. Loneliness is what I'd felt in their crowded house, hemmed in by control and correction. Here, in the quiet, with no one speaking for me or over me, I felt something entirely different. Presence. My own. Outside, a breeze rustled the leaves. The house held steady, and I understood something I should have understood months ago. Freedom isn't loud. It's the absence of fear. And tonight, for the first time in a long while, I was unafraid. I woke before sunrise the next morning, not because something hurt, and not because someone else's routine dictated when I should open my eyes. I woke simply because my body decided to. A small freedom, so ordinary that most people never notice it, until it's taken away. I sat on the edge of my own bed, feet touching my own floor, and let the early light settle over the room. There was no tension hiding behind the walls, no locked doors, no footsteps outside my room meant to monitor me, only the quiet breathing of a house that recognized me again. I made tea and drank it slowly, watching the day unfold through my kitchen window. Birds moved through the yard. A neighbor walked by with her dog. Life went on, steady and unhurried, and I felt myself falling into its rhythm, not as an intruder, not as a burden, but as a woman who still had a place in the world. Around lunchtime, Matthew arrived, my grandson, the one Daniel would have trusted, the one who never treated me like an obligation. When he saw me standing strong on my porch, his eyes tightened with worry and relief. "Grandma," he said, "I got your message." "Are you okay?" "I am now." He hugged me, real, warm, without hesitation. Then he stepped back, studying my face the way only someone who truly sees you can. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. "Not everything," I said. "Just enough." So I told him enough. Not the details meant for lawyers. Not the words that still carried the sting of humiliation. Just the truth. That I'd been diminished. And I'd stopped allowing it. That I'd been controlled. And I'd stepped out of reach. That I'd been afraid until clarity replaced the fear. Matthew listened. Really listened. No interruptions, no excuses for anyone, no attempts to soften what happened. And when I finished, he nodded once, slow and deliberate. "I'm proud of you," he said. It had been so long since I'd heard that from anyone that my breath caught. But it didn't break me. It steadied me. We spent the afternoon checking the house. The heater, the smoke alarms, the back steps that needed sanding. We made a grocery list. We laughed at the stubborn old window in the kitchen that Daniel had fixed 3 times and still refused to stay open. Peace isn't dramatic. It's not loud or triumphant. It's the quiet knowledge that you are no longer afraid to live your own life. When Matthew left in the evening, the house didn't feel empty. It felt lived in. Mine again. I sat by the lamp, opened my notebook, and wrote the final line of this chapter. They tried to make me small. I remembered my size. And that was enough. So if you're reading this, if you've ever been diminished, dismissed, controlled, or quietly pushed aside, hear me now, from one older woman to another. Your dignity is not negotiable. Your voice is not optional. Your life is still yours. And if no one else has said it lately, let me be the one. Stand up for yourself. Choose yourself. And if you need permission to begin, take mine.